If you make photography the source of your happiness, it will fail you every time. Any piece of work, any work we do, if we base our value and our happiness solely on that work, we are doomed to be depressed, I think.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Photo Forward podcast, where we explore the stories behind some of the greatest visual storytellers in the world, from their photographic origins to finding work-life balance as creative professionals to how to actually make a living as a photographer, cinematographer, or multimedia creator. We uncover what makes them tick and their shutters click. I'm your host, Ben Brewer. To be honest, I didn't plan on releasing this episode until later on in the summer. But with everything going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, this seems like honestly the much more relevant and timely episode to be releasing to you all, the listeners of Photo Forward. But before we get into all of today's episode, I want to give a big thanks to everyone who's listening, subscribing, and dropping a rating or review on the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. It means so much to me to see you guys connecting and really starting to create a community around the show. So if you want to hear more inspiring creative content like we've been producing, please head over to your podcast app of choice and give Photo Forward a review or a rating to help make this show reach an even larger audience around the world. All right, let's get into the show. These days, being stuck in isolation, a lot of us are being forced to grapple with the question, if I'm not taking photographs, am I still a photographer? Or insert your applicable verb and profession here. We're all trying to figure out who we are rather than what we are or what we do. That's a painful process for a lot of us creatives, myself included. And it's the self-same journey today's guest has been on for years in, around, and through the photography world, and has some mindful wisdom to share from her experience along the way. Courtney Perry is a photojournalist based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, formerly a staff photographer at the Dallas Morning News. She now freelances for various local and national clients while based in the Twin Cities. Her home is filled with a spouse, his children, their dogs, and much love. On today's episode, Courtney and I explore how to enjoy photography without basing your happiness on your work, how she's been able to build a stable and healthy client base as a freelancer, and why having a dark night of the soul moment in your creative career can be a game-changing event to sharpen your focus as a photographer or multimedia creator. Show notes and photos from today's episode can be found at photoforward.media/podcast. So without any further ado, today's beautiful and timely interview with photojournalist Courtney Perry. Courtney Perry, welcome to the Photo Forward podcast.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go in a lot of different directions on the podcast, talking about your freelance work, your time in Dallas, and what you're doing now. But let's go way back. When did you first want to become a photographer? What was that? Was there a moment, or was it kind of gradually kind of working into it?
I will say that I was working as a photographer when I made the decision. So I graduated with a liberal arts degree from college in 1999. Full disclosure, I'm 43. And I had taken some photography classes. It was interesting. I didn't think I could make a living doing it, but then I randomly applied for a job at a local suburban community newspaper company. Was hired. So I learned a great deal on the job from a guy that worked there. John taught me everything about newspapers, about lenses, all that good stuff. And I was racing to an accident scene, I think, one day. And I was thinking in my head, you know, all these photographers I've met, these people I know that are doing photojournalism, they have dedicated their lives to it. The blood, sweat, and tears is like 100%. They're there all the time. And I thought, can I do that? I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I want to do that. But in the moment, I felt, yeah, I can do that. Like, this would be good for the world. I can do this. I am enjoying this, even the difficult stuff. Like, let's do it. And that was when I made the decision.
Okay. What paper was that?
That was for, that day I was shooting for the Louisville Leader.
Louisville Leader.
But
okay.
I worked for this company that had about 22 different suburban papers in the DFW Metroplex. It was back in the day when that was a viable thing. And I could work for them and afford to live, you know, with a roommate on my own.
Okay. So going back a little earlier then, like you had an itch to take photos at some point, like start shooting. What initially drew you to that? I mean, to even start going down the route?
I think there's a part of me that loves searching for beauty. And I've always loved that, even as a child. And I was able to do that with a camera. That's what initially drew me to it. And my dad gave me his Mamiya that he got in Vietnam when he was serving in Vietnam when I was in college. And that's the camera I learned on. He later donated it to a library. I was like, Dad, but it's okay. I had my special time with it. And he takes credit now for my career.
That's interesting. There's a number of photographers that can credit the passing down of an old camera. Yeah. Something about that just clicked. And for me, it's the same thing. I've got an old Nikon S2 rangefinder that my dad got when he was in high school and then passed it down to me. And it was like, oh, so there's some sort of passing of the torch or I don't know. And I think maybe we lose that a little bit with digital cameras now that everybody starts knowing how to take pictures on an iPad or an iPhone. But
true. But maybe it's in the genes a little bit.
Maybe. Yeah. There's something to that. So you've taken this first job at the suburban paper and you had that pivotal moment, that click of, I need to do this. I need to go all in that. How long were you working there at that paper? What was that like for you as a photographer just starting out?
It was incredible because at that time in life, you don't need much sleep. You're just having fun. I was having fun, a great deal of fun. And you just shot everything. And I think that's what's sad about losing the local papers and the smaller papers is the experience for young photographers to have that daily grind and doing everything from politics to sports to features to the pet of the week. I mean, all of it was such a great learning tool. And I got to a point, though, where I felt like I had learned all I could learn there, and I was feeling a little stagnant. And I'd met a lot of freelancers in Dallas after working for 2 years. I would see them on assignments, various places. I went to them for portfolio reviews and they would give me input. They taught me about off-camera flash. I mean, all the real basics. And so after 2 years there, I quit to go freelance. I had a friend who was a freelancer and he encouraged me to do it. Wow.
So only after 2 years.
2.5 maybe, but yeah.
I think maybe it's just the changing nature of news and everything. I think that's a much longer process nowadays of transitioning from staff to freelance and like, can I even do it? And maybe that's just the changing market. But what was your mindset as you were considering moving towards full-time freelance?
So nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to write an invoice. Friends had to show me. What was helpful was that in Dallas, there was a lot of money in the grip and grin world. So I could make extra money shooting many parties when I needed to supplement the news part. But on the other hand, thankfully at that time, I mean, the Dallas Morning News was using a ton of freelancers and there was a ton of work. And the great part about that was then I began to learn from other freelancers on the job. And it was before the IRS cracked down on equipment usage and building usage. So we were all able to go in, process our film in the Morning News building, along with all the staffers. We were even able to get edits. You know, people actually looked at our film and we had discussions about things. We were yelled at for things. And that was a beautiful experience as well, that I would wish upon the world. But sadly, that too is kind of not the case. It's much more
isolating being a freelancer now because you shoot by yourself, you edit by yourself, you file by yourself, you invoice by yourself, and that's it. You may never even meet an editor face to face.
Or even get much of a response. I have a good friend and it drives her crazy. She never worked on a staff. She's only been freelance and she'll shoot an assignment, turn it in. And she's like, I've got nothing. Like, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. And I told her, I was like, they're just so busy. Like, I'm sure it was great, but they're just on to the next 10 things.
Yeah. Can you describe, are there any memories of any particular mentors or people that you worked with during that time that really stick out, or any lessons from back then?
Okay, here's a funny one. So this was back at the suburban papers when I was on staff. I mean, I was supposed to know what I was doing. And this guy, John Wolke, who really showed me the ropes and everything, he had been the sole shooter at the Brenham newspaper in a small town in Texas. And so he knew what was going on. And I was supposed to take a picture that incorporated a highway and a water tower to show some encroachment on this area. And the only way I could figure out to get both of these things in the shot was just to stop on the highway, to pull my car over and use my wide angle lens to get the shot. And I showed it to him and he just busted out laughing. He's like, "Why did you use a wide angle lens?" I was like, "Oh, well, how was I supposed to get it all in there?" He's like, "Use a long lens. It compresses everything." So these are the basics that I was learning on the job. I mean,
and you were the only photographer at the paper, or you had
there were
at your local
two of us covering about 5 areas, and then there was another bureau where there were 3 or 4 other photographers. So it was they were crazy days.
And any like lessons, less technical maybe, but like lessons about the craft.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a circus that came through town, a really low budget circus. And I went out there, met this sad clown. I mean, this is a story. This is kind of unbelievable, I think. And he really wanted to talk. I photographed him, and so he said, "Can we go back to my trailer? I just want to sit down, get some water." Okay. So we go over there. He grabs some water. He sits down on the steps of his trailer. And he starts telling me about he and his wife used to travel with the circus together. And last year they had been in a caravan and he saw her get in a wreck and be killed.
Wow.
And he's telling me this and he's crying. And I ask him if it's okay if I take photos. He says yes. So I take the pictures and we have a little moment. And I'm thinking, feeling for him and also thinking, I can't believe this is happening. This is very strange. The sad clown is crying and telling me this beautiful story. So I get back to the paper, put the film in the machine. The only time this ever happened to me in my entire career working with film, the machine fried the film. And it was blank when I pulled it out. And in that moment, I just thought, the universe is telling me that was about that moment with that person. I don't even know that the photo would have run in the paper. Like, did it have anything to do with anything? I don't know. But I learned that was about the experience and that I need to let go a little bit.
That's fascinating. I mean, gosh, the chances of that.
I know.
And did it ever fry your film any other times?
Never did. I never figured out what happened.
Wow. You have that experience now as your memory.
Yes, I will never forget it.
So working as a freelancer in Dallas area, it sounds like there was a fair amount of work, lots of work. Was it just all pouring in all at once and you had to turn down assignments, or what were you doing to build up that repertoire of clients?
I wouldn't say that I had a repertoire. In the beginning, I was seeking the clients. Word of mouth helped. So freelancing for the Dallas Morning News, I was doing that right off the bat. And then I would meet people and make connections. But those connections would be, for instance, with the party pics, the little money makers that kind of killed my soul. But I also, I had a good time for a little bit doing that. And I did make some friends, and a good PR friend, a good friend who's an artist in Dallas so I enjoyed some of it for sure. But once I had those PR gigs as well as the morning news, I wasn't putting myself out there. I wasn't trying too hard. And then whenever clients from other papers in other cities would call the DMN, they would give them their list of freelancers. So it was pretty convenient.
So it's about connecting with the paper.
And I will say, even when I moved up here, I worked hard the first year or two to try and meet people, make things happen. But my good friend here, Caroline, and I talk about how we don't really market ourselves. And yet we're taken care of. Now, I'm telling you this, and I don't pretend to have any advice for anyone on how to do things. I'm not saying this is the right way to do things by any stretch of the means, but it's somehow worked out. I've continued to meet people, gain work through word of mouth, and it's just enough for right now. It has definitely gotten slow and been tricky. But what I've done up here is I use the slow times to go through yoga teacher training, for instance. So now I teach yoga twice a week. That fills my time, so I'm not quite as aware of how slow it gets in photography. And it also engages that mind, body, spirit, health aspect that also keeps me going. And I'm engaging with people, and I'm doing something totally different. So that's helped me balance.
And we'll get into that more. That's a big focus of this episode, is kind of being a whole human as a photographer, which is we often forget about as we're grinding every day. So when you were back in Dallas, shooting, trying to be as busy as possible, covering as much, even the grip and grins that kill our souls, what did you kind of see as your sort of career aspirations at that time? Where do you want to go?
You know, I guess there's two parts to that. First of all, I know my personality type, my motivation in life is to be happy. So as long as I was having fun and enjoying myself, I didn't see a need to go to a bigger paper or a different market. And the Dallas Morning News was pretty big. You know, I felt pretty great there. Secondly, at the same time, I always knew that my body didn't feel like it fit in Texas. I knew so many people all over the state. I knew the state like at the back of my hand from driving it. I love it, but I always knew I wanted to be somewhere else ultimately to live my life, but I didn't know where that was. That was just a feeling that I had in the back of my mind. So I had that feeling, but I also had no big plan to move beyond. Just to become a better photographer bit by bit. Moving from freelance to getting on staff at the morning news was a big jump for me and felt really great. So I didn't think beyond that.
What was that like? So you saw an opening and applied, or what was that process like?
Let me tell you again about the universe. I had applied maybe 2 times in the past. Nothing ever came of it. I mean, I was young. I had as you can tell, like I learned a lot on the job. The 2 people I interviewed with were right to not hire me. And then years pass. I hadn't interviewed in a while. Years pass. I'm still freelancing for them. I go to a going away party for one of the photographers. He's moving to New York. He's a great guy. And all the D-Men people are there, and the director of photography is there. And she sees me and she's like, "Courtney, didn't you want a job at one time?" I said, "Well, yeah, that'd be great." So that's how it all came to be. But they had an experience. I think they were going to hire someone else. And that person at the last minute said, "No, I'm not coming." So they were needing to hire someone fast. So again, I'm sure I wasn't the best candidate for the job, but I got it. And I'm so thankful I did. And I think I did really well with it. I mean, I am at my heart a daily shooter, and a lot of the DMN people were, incredible photographers, very project based, and more power to them. I loved like every day being different. And that was where I feel like I helped out, or I could help out, was doing my best as a daily shooter. And then the project people have their free time to do their projects, that was how I kind of saw myself. Even though I did end up doing a project or 2, but I'd say they weren't my best work in some ways.
Can you go on and tell me a little bit about some of those projects, or why they did or didn't work exactly how you wanted it to?
I feel for me, it's difficult to have a long-term focus. It's hard to know what I have yet to shoot, to spend a lot of time with people and not really know to feel like, what am I doing here? That's required, I think, a lot in a lot of project-based photography. There's a lot of times where you don't pick up your camera. There's a lot of times you happen to be in a perfect moment, but you never would have thought you'd be there. You never could have imagined and planned for it. There was a homelessness story in Dallas that I felt that way about. I did an okay job, maybe not a great job. There was a school story about a little town in Mexico where a bunch of people from this one little town. We're moving and going to the same one high school in Dallas. So there's this connection. I feel like I did amazing in the Mexico part of it. And maybe it was because it was a shorter period of time, or because it was just, so incredibly beautiful, stunning, so different. It was more difficult to stay with the kids, to keep going back to the school, to try and find something unique in the same spot over and over again.
Logistically or creatively?
Creatively. Waiting, like trying to find the right moments. It was about the moments and what was going to tell the story best.
That's tricky. Yeah. And there has to be a certain level of uncertainty in a long-term project. You have to not quite know where it's going to go and move with it. Do you think it was just a matter of you just needed to spend more time with it? Or because this is a struggle, especially with freelancers, is one of the ways that we're told so often the way you get work is shoot personal projects. You shoot personal projects, you put them out into the world, they get in front of editors, and that helps a lot. So what do you think it was a matter of just needing more time, or maybe it just wasn't there?
I don't think it's my gift. And I'm okay with that. And I wasn't for a long time. I felt like I should be figuring out what I'm going to do personal project wise. I should be dedicating more of my life to these projects and getting more imagery out of them. But I come back to, as I've grown older and know about who I am, that I thrive in variety, that it helps me to have clear tasks that have a start and a finish, and to accomplish them and then move on. And I think there's plenty of work out there that requires that. Again, I don't recommend like my way of life to other people, but I find that as I've learned more about myself, I can settle into that a little better. And as I'm living and shooting the way I shoot, then I get more assignments that cater to that. I chose not to do video. I did a little bit when I was on staff. I did a little bit as a volunteer after the fact when I was freelancing, just because I thought, well, I need to keep this skill up. But then I knew that I didn't want to spend my time editing video. So I said, well, I'm just not going to do this. I'm just going to shoot stills.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And it's been okay for me.
It's tough because we are pressured to, now at least, it's unheard of to think of most freelancers that can't do video at all. It's more expected that you are going to be able to do both or either.
Well, I will say this. I do shoot B-roll. Clients will ask for B-roll and I shoot that and send it in. But I tell them, I'll send you the footage, but I'm not going to edit. And that's okay. It's worked out.
It's okay somehow. To work on the things that you like and bring you joy.
Yeah. That's what I like to believe. Yeah. That's what I've tried.
Yeah. So maybe it's not necessarily that all of us freelancers have to have personal projects or whatnot, but you need to be creating the work you want to get paid for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you want to do more kind of long-term, in-depth storytelling,
right, do
more of that.
Right. Yeah. Or I would say, if you notice a lack in an area of your own, in your own portfolio of photos that are in situations that you'd like to be in, then that's a good idea to put yourself in those situations that you want to be in. So yes, shoot the photos so that you can show people I've been here and I can be here more.
What do you kind of do for sort of creative inspiration? Like what has been helpful for you over the course of both your freelance and staff career to kind of keep that daily level of work and quality up? I
do enjoy photographing our dogs and I do enjoy photographing the seasons. When I first moved to Minnesota, I was blown away by the snow and the piles of snow, and there are dump trucks full of snow driving on the highway. And I thought it was hilarious. And so the first winter I was here, there were giant piles of snow in this mall parking lot near where I lived. And there was a shopping cart on top of one. And I would go out and photograph that periodically. I photographed the snow a lot when I first moved here. And I still do. The snow, the ice. Again, it's that search for beauty for me. That keeps me looking. It's not that I'm wanting to shoot for a nature magazine, but at the same time, and my husband, he's a writer. He's also a hunter and outdoorsman. And we've done a few things together for like Pheasants Forever or Journal or things like that. So there is an element of the outdoors that I do photograph and want to promote. But I think striving to continue to see things in new ways, even if it's just a photo of my dog.
Novelty in unexpected places.
Yeah. And another important part, I would say, is connecting with other photographer, freelance in particular, friends in town, and just talking, getting together for coffee and talking helps a lot.
That's one thing I've noticed since moving to the Twin Cities is just having people you can share experiences with, even if it's just in little passing ways. I mean, we live in a crazy little career, and having someone that gets how you feel, gets how you are processing things, it makes a big difference. Yeah. So you're working in Dallas at the paper, and you said you never felt like Texas was the place for you. Why Minnesota?
Well, I also have the Dallas Morning News to thank for that, because they sent me up here to Minnesota in 2008 to photograph the Republican National Convention. And it was my practice, still is, if I'm going somewhere for work and I know someone in that place, even tangentially, I will get their phone number, text them, and try to meet up, just so I have an emergency plan, someone I can ask for information or a ride. And this guy, Tony, I kind of knew. He was a friend of a friend. I'd met him once before when he had been in Dallas. But as I was getting on the plane to go to Minnesota, I remembered, oh yeah, that guy, Tony. Got his number from a friend, texted him, said, hey, I've never covered a convention. I probably won't have time, but would you want to have lunch? He said, no, we're not supposed to go to St. Paul. The security is going to be crazy. So I said, okay, no problem. And then I ended up in downtown Minneapolis following the Texas delegation, and he happened to be in downtown Minneapolis at the same time. We had lunch. We realized we were both divorcing at the time. Had a 2-beer lunch with tears and said our goodbyes. And then we kept in touch and started dating long distance. And 2.5 years after that, I quit at the DMN and moved up here, and I happen to be married to him right now. Oh.
That's one way to move market.
Yeah. I was thinking about it earlier today. I will say I never lived alone as a freelancer. I always had a roommate or a spouse at the time. And when I moved up here, it was all this to say, I could not have moved up here as a freelancer, just sight unseen, not knowing anyone, on my own. I came up here and I moved in with him. So financially, I just want to be real about that. I mean, it's a big deal to move markets as a freelancer, and you should probably have something set up before you move.
Yeah. And you kind of alluded to this earlier, that you do supplement your income as a photographer teaching yoga. And it sounds like you have a very sort of mindful attitude about your career as a photographer. And what do you see as the connection? Why yoga, I guess?
Mind, body, health, mind, body, spirit, I would say. It does not contribute to my income, but it contributes to my sanity. The regular thing I have in photography is a month-to-month contract with a local university that's part-time, and that's a good steady basis for my freelance work. The yoga is the training that I did when work was slow with the freelance job, freelance work 1 year. And now that I teach it, I just teach twice a week. And it allows me this completely different experience to stand up in front of people, to guide them through movement, to encourage them I love that people of all ages and all shapes and sizes come to my classes. And it fills me up to hear people leave and be relaxed, like be just like sigh of relief. They leave and they're zen, they're calm. And I feel that our photos can and do make a difference in the world. But this is an experience of like, I'm getting to have this face-to-face interaction with someone and in real time see and feel a response from them that's hopefully positive. But it really balances me. It takes all of my energy and attention. So I'm never thinking about photography when I'm teaching yoga in a direct sense. I'm never worrying about work. I am 100% there because you have to be when you're leading something. Mm-hmm. And that really balances and helps me out.
Do you think you need to have something like that in your life as a photographer to get out of your own head?
I personally do. And there was a young woman when I was in my 20s, she was in her 20s in Dallas. She was diehard photojournalist, like wanted to eat, sleep, and breathe it. She visited a very prominent photojournalist in Florida who asked her, or told her rather, get a hobby. And her words were, I paraphrase because this was coming through her and this was many years ago. She said, if you make photography the source of your happiness, it will fail you every time. And I do agree with that.
Wow.
Or any piece of work, any work we do, if we base our value and our happiness solely on that work, we are doomed to be depressed, I think.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's tough because it's tough when you derive joy from your work.
Yes.
Where it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, that's great.
I wonder that I get paid to do something that I would do anyways.
That's true. Don't tell anyone that.
Right? So how do you not become dependent on that for your happiness? It's
hard. And I do feel like shifting away from daily shooting, because I don't shoot every day right now. Some weeks I am, some weeks I'm not. Sometimes it's a whole week that I'm not shooting. And the shift from daily 3 and 4 assignments to having nothing, it took me years to be okay with that. Years. I feel like daily photojournalism is a drug, and it's a good one. It's a good drug, but you've got the withdrawal. Mm-hmm. And during those slow times in the beginning, you do question your worth. You feel like, oh my gosh, everyone else is doing so much and I'm not doing anything today. I'm just sitting on my couch, or I'm just trying to figure out who my next client can be. But the reality is there are 50 other people in your same town that are thinking the same thing and doing the exact same thing, especially nowadays. But I don't know of any solution for that. Even I was doing yoga that whole time. But it's taken, I feel like I'm only just finally okay with not being a real photojournalist, if you had to put a term on it. But I am a photojournalist, as are the people listening to this, I imagine. Yeah,
a lot of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. A photographer that I've heard talk about is like, nowadays, everyone is sort of a hyphen.
Yeah.
You're a hyphen. You're a photographer / yoga instructor / and it's okay to be multifaceted.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a lot of people I've seen doing work at universities. You yourself, didn't you work for a university for a while?
Yeah. I worked for a year after graduated.
And I just saw someone else who freelances in Miami. She took a job at a university there, but she was clear, like, I'm still a photojournalist. I'm still doing journalism. And journalism does not pay the bills. Let me just say that again. Journalism does not pay the bills. It's impossible. It's impossible to support yourself only doing journalism unless you're on a staff. That has been my experience, and that's been the experience of everyone I've seen. Mm-hmm. I don't know of anyone who's doing journalism all the time as a freelancer making a living.
Yeah, or at least a living for more than just yourself.
Right.
I think a lot of people will kind of rough it for themselves.
Exactly.
And they can do that, for a period of time. Yes. Until either they're mind, body, or spirit gives out.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So given that you aren't shooting every day, and myself included, and a lot of other freelancers, you've come to terms with it sort of mentally. How do you keep your skills fresh when you aren't shooting every day? Because I know for me, I've noticed if I haven't shot in a week or two at a sort of news assignment, you have to kick off the rust a little bit. I mean, how do you keep fresh when you aren't necessarily shooting every day? Because that is, like you said, that's the drug, but it's also the drug that makes you better.
Mm-hmm. Though I would counter and say, I've found that I'm better after putting the camera down for a while, because shooting every day, it gets rote. It's this, you get used to it. So I choose to see, if I haven't shot for a week, going into something that's important, that's new client, I will meditate and just ask for new ways of seeing and concentrate on that so that I can step into it with fresh eyes. Again, this is just me. And again, this is my experience. That's how I feel. I feel like I'm fresher not having picked up the camera for a while. I'm 43. So, I mean, there were many years where every day I was picking up a camera. That's how I am. That's how I feel right now. That's where I am currently. I may face that issue. I guess being technologically fresh, I think the importance there, that's more important for me to consciously, like, for instance, I need to do a firmware update right now that I haven't done in a while. Okay. A little note to self, but it's maintaining a connection with people who are continually upgrading their technology or talking about gear. I need to be with people who are able to and wanting to do that too, so that I stay up to date with gear, I would say, for sure.
Yeah.
Is that too boring?
No, that's a fair answer. No, that's being around people that eat, sleep, and breathe a particular part of the industry is a good thing, I think, because then you don't necessarily have to let it consume you.
Yeah.
I can dabble in sort of the technology side. I can dabble in the storytelling side, and you can kind of bring that in depending on how you select the people and groups you hang out with. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of it. What did you do when you moved? Speaking of groups, when you moved to Minneapolis, how did you sort of build that tribe of photographers and people that you surround yourself with?
At the time, Visual MN is an organization now that was previously called the Minnesota Press Photographers Association. That was still in existence. I connected with the Star Tribune people right away because of connection in the industry. So I began freelancing for them right away, pretty much. And meeting those people through that organization was quite helpful. And now those meetups don't happen quite so often, but we're all connected on social media. So I do appreciate seeing everyone's work, personal and public, and there's a connection there. And that way, even if I go to a bar and I haven't seen someone in a year, it still feels like, hey, I know you, you know me. Like, we've got this thing in common, and that feels good.
Yeah. Are there any particular like roadblocks in your career that you feel like you've had to like work through? Any like, or put this another way, like what have been the barriers to you getting to where you are today as a photographer?
I mean, there was a period of time around 2015 where I thought of completely quitting.
Really?
Because work was so slow and I questioned everything. So the barrier at that time, lack of work, would have been the biggest barrier there. So I have faced that. I've had those down times. I think that was at a time when I was still going through that withdrawal. So I had an idea of how I wanted my work to look and how I wanted it to be very journalistic. And I think that was a time where I needed to expand my client base and understand that not everything was going to appear in a news source and be okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a dark moment that a lot of people have thought. I mean, should I just sell my gear?
Yeah.
Is this it?
I thought that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how did you work through that?
Talking with friends again, and that photographer community, and my spouse as well. He was very encouraging and just said, this is who you are. Don't give up. So that was very nice. And I got to say, if you are able to have pets. They're the best therapy ever. I think that carried me through as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you saw through it to the other side, because seeing your work is awesome. It's really solid work. And had you given that up, the world wouldn't have that.
Well, thanks. But it's so funny when you asked me to even be on this. I am a photographer. I make my living as a photographer, but I'm not one of the greats. And I know a lot of the greats, and I love a lot of them. And my husband and I were just like in tears the other night laughing about me being an award-winning photographer. And we always laugh about this because there was one year where in MPPA I won first place. There were no other placements in the category because it was best audio slideshow of a natural disaster. So clearly, I might have been the only submission there. I don't know, but it was in that little time between sound slides and video. But I've got to say, I still really love the audio slideshow so much. But he joked, yeah, they threw out that category after that year because you just broke the mold. Well, it was because the technology was so different. Anyway, yeah, the idea of being, I don't know what makes you someone as a photographer. Is it being on a big staff? Is it winning a Pulitzer? I think those are big things. Yeah. So I'm not a big capital BIG photographer, but I make my living as one. And I just would encourage that. I would imagine there are a lot of us out there who are quote unquote no names, but we're still very needed in the community, I think. Don't you? Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's, everyone has their idea when they start of where they're going to be or where they're quote supposed to be or supposed to end up given what they want to do. And it's okay to not get to that highest level, whatever. How did you go through? I mean, that's a transition even in of itself, is seeing your work for what it is and your goals for what they are. I mean, was it during that sort of dark night of the soul moment of not having as much work and going, well, I'm kind of, you have to be at peace with it, or what was that like?
Day to day, it's still in the back of my mind. I was just talking with friends about this last week. Sadly, there is something about when you get that national assignment, having your name, a national byline, that gives you credibility and validity. In some ways in the industry. So people see that and say, oh, okay, she's okay. I can hire her for this, and it bugs me that that's the case, but it is. So I try to be okay with that and not get too connected to it. But it's difficult. It's still difficult to this day. When enough time goes by where you don't have the journalistic work for a while, I think you inevitably start to question yourself again. And that's where I would say go to yoga or your preferred exercise or walk in the woods.
Just get out of your own head for a little bit.
Yeah. Because in the end, I mean, just life is short, and we're so, like you said, gifted. It's a gift to be able to do what we do. It's a privilege for a lot of us. And so I don't want to take that for granted, being morose about the level of my work in some ways, or who I'm shooting for.
Yeah.
I also don't want to insult the people who we journalists consider as the lower echelon of who we shoot for, the business client or that sort of thing. I mean, I would hope that I treat everyone with respect and appreciation for being able to photograph what they're allowing me to photograph.
Yeah. You used a really interesting word there that I want to kind of go in on a little deeper. What do you mean by privilege? The privilege we have as photographers. What do you think that is?
I will say this. My first job when I was 16 was working in a grocery store as a checker. And I would talk to people, and a lot of people wouldn't even respond to me. And I knew, or I was able to, I knew like I was getting an education. My parents were able to send me to college. And then I got to do this amazing work that is my choice. And I think that, there are a great number of people who are working these jobs that are backbreaking jobs and might never get beyond that day-to-day drudgery for various reasons. And I want to be aware that that could be me, and I feel for them. And I hope that every interaction that I have with someone who was a checker like me at the grocery store would be a kind one. Although I did recently have a bad experience at the DPS, and then I felt horrible because that wasn't her fault. But anyway, so we all have our good days and our bad days, but I'm just very aware that I could be checking groceries, and yet I'm photographing amazing things.
Do you think there's a duty as a photographer or as a photojournalist, I guess more specifically, do you think that's a duty that we have the ability, therefore we should?
That's a good question. Yes, I do think so, especially locally. We've had a lot of things in Minneapolis locally the past few years, a lot of protests, a lot of important things happening here. And even when it hasn't been an assignment, I've felt the need to go out and shoot because it's happening in my backyard, and I want to document and share, and I can in an effective way. So I agree with you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even if it won't get seen by anybody, it's worth doing.
Yeah. Seen by anyone, I would say I would post it on social media. Again, you're not guaranteed an audience, and social media, but yes, you can at least put it out there. We have a platform, even if it's not giving us any reimbursement. And I'm not promoting working for free, but in some cases, if there's something that we want people to see, yeah, maybe it is our duty.
Mm-hmm. Do you think people can kind of see that you care in your work? Like, even if it's just like that, do you think that us caring about our work translates to the work itself sometimes? Or is it just something we have to do?
I hope it translates. I certainly do. I guess
that's a little more philosophical of a question.
Right. We do have, speaking of social media, we have the opportunity to write whatever we want to write in that Instagram caption. And so yesterday I was photographing at this university and just doing some facility shots. And I was in the weightlifting room, and there were two guys in there. They didn't know each other. One guy was in a wheelchair, and he wheeled over and asked the other guy, this Marine, is like, can you lift me up so I can do some pull-ups? And they were both talking to me and being really kind and telling me about themselves. And they were both fine with me photographing them. So I photographed that moment, and I posted it and wrote about how the strength of both of them inspired me, and as well as their kindness. And it was a privilege to be in their presence. I was grateful that they were so kind to me, and I had a good time. And then it also inspired me to go to the gym. I kept it light. So we do have the opportunity to get more personal. I know that there are a lot of photographers, though, who keep a very strict line about the face that they show the public and the work that they show the public, and none of it shows much of who they are. And that's fine. That's who they are. And it would be impossible for me to do that. But I also don't want to reveal everything. Mm-hmm. It's a balance, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think every person has to find where that line is, where you're becoming too involved, say in a story, too involved in the story, or if you're not giving enough of yourself to it, that comes through.
Yes.
That makes sense.
I think the most crucial piece of any photographer's journey, get to know who you are on that note. Are you that person who wants to put on the professional face and only show the professional work, to highly curate your Instagram feed so it only looks a certain way. I mean, I have pictures of my dogs with stickers on their heads, and then a news photo. Other people would be shocked and horrified and say, that's horrible. But that's who I am, and I'm okay with that. I would encourage everyone, no matter how old you are, I guess, to ask yourself who you are, who you want to be, and then let your work reflect that. Like, try to make your work reflect that, rather than just throwing everything to the wind and trying to shoot everything and see where it takes you. Although maybe that works for some people. But I think it is crucial to know yourself just in general in this world. And then we're able to, when we're compassionate with ourselves, then we can be more compassionate with others. There was an article recently in the Washington Post about compassion. First, it was mindfulness for a few years. Now there's studies about compassion, and there are trainings in workplaces for compassion. Like we're at a really angry, ugly place in the world right now, especially in our society. And I think if we spend that time first having compassion for ourselves, we can be better photographers. We can seek the clients that suit us best, and maybe find a good hobby.
Well, Courtney, this has been an awesome conversation, and getting into the more philosophical sides of being a photojournalist and being a photographer. So I want to thank you for that. So to leave things off here, we're going to have a couple quick lightning round questions, and then we'll wrap up and let people know where they can find more about you.
Okay.
All right. What's the one thing in your bag you don't leave home without?
It's that 50. I know a lot of people have said this, but I'm just going to go with the flow. It's true.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the most important thing you've said no to in your photography career?
Tabloids.
Tabloids?
Yes.
Okay.
Bye.
I know this is a lightning round, but I want to get into it a little more. Why not that? Where the line just kind of for you was?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very simple, it's a very clear no.
What keeps you up at night?
Well, honestly, just reading.
Good answer. What advice would you give to a student graduating from university today about a career in photography or photojournalism?
I have no idea. I guess I would say start again with that, figure out who you are, passionately pursue what drives you, what motivates you, and what you love. That's all I know.
Perfect. Well, on that, where can people see more of your work or connect with you online? On
Twitter, I am Perry Photo. That's Coperry Photo, Photo. Instagram, I know it's annoying to be different, but Courtney Perry Photo on Instagram. My website is just my name. You can find me there.
Awesome. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Enjoying listening to the Photo Forward podcast? Want to hear more thought-provoking, creative visual storytellers? Well, this is where you come in. We want to get the word out as wide as possible about Photo Forward and reach as many listeners as possible. And the best way to do that is through reviews and recommendations on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you consume your podcasts. If you want to support more engaging and intimate conversations with photographers, videographers, and storytellers the world over, head on over to the Photo Forward page and drop a review or even a rating. It means a ton to growing the show, and I personally read through each and every one to make sure this is the best damn visual storytelling podcast out there. As much fun as creating this series in a vacuum and pushing out content into the void is, I want to hear from you guys. Are there topics or guests that you'd love to get on the podcast here in 2020? Or are there some big nagging questions that you've got on photography or cinematography that you want me to cover in one of these solo episodes? Just hit me up at bbrewerphoto or drop an email to podcast@photoforward.media. My goal is to make 2020 a much more collaborative, community-focused season of the Photo Forward podcast, and I can't wait to keep creating with all of you throughout the year. So, as always, keep seeing, keep shooting, and keep putting your best photo forward. Later.